What happens when one of Hollywood's most respected actors walks onto a morning talk show expecting a friendly conversation, only to be ambushed by a host with a personal agenda? In just 49 seconds, a simple question turned into the most explosive interview meltdown in Good Morning America history, and it all came crashing down because one host couldn't keep his ego in check. Kevin Costner settled into the bright red chair across from the Good Morning America panel, his easy smile and relaxed demeanor radiating the kind of genuine warmth that had made him a beloved figure for decades. He'd come to talk about his latest project, a passion piece he'd spent years developing. Robin Roberts sat to his left, her welcoming presence a calming force in the studio. Michael Strawn occupied the far seat, his athletic frame leaning forward with interest. And then there was George Stephanopoulos, positioned directly across from Kevin, his expression already carrying an edge that seemed out of place for what should have been a lighthearted morning segment. The segment began innocently enough. Robin opened with a warm greeting. "Kevin, it's so wonderful to have you here with us this morning. Your fans are absolutely thrilled about this new project." Kevin's face lit up. "Thank you so much for having me. You know, this has been a labor of love for such a long time. I'm just excited to finally share it with everyone." Michael jumped in with his characteristic enthusiasm. "Man, I've been following the behind-the-scenes stuff, and it looks incredible. What made you want to tell this particular story?" Kevin leaned forward, his passion evident. "Well, Michael, I think there are stories that need to be told. Stories that remind us about what really matters. This one, it's about family, about integrity, about standing up for what's right, even when it costs you everything." George shifted in his seat, and something in his body language changed. His jaw tightened slightly, and when he spoke, there was an unmistakable bite to his words. "Speaking of what things cost," George interjected, cutting across the natural flow of conversation, "let's talk about the budget overruns on this project. There are reports suggesting you went significantly over budget. Some people might say that's irresponsible." The temperature in the studio seemed to drop several degrees. Robin's smile faltered. Michael's eyebrows rose. Kevin, to his credit, maintained his composure, though a flicker of confusion crossed his face. "Well, George, I'm not sure where you're getting your information, but we came in right where we planned. Making films is complex, and sometimes—" "Right where you planned?" George interrupted again, his tone growing sharper. "Or right where you revised your plan after initially going over. There's a difference, wouldn't you say?" Kevin's expression shifted from confusion to concern. "I'd say that's a pretty aggressive way to frame a question, especially when the facts don't support it. We were transparent with our investors from day one. Every dollar is accounted for." Robin attempted to redirect. "Kevin, why don't you tell us about working with the cast? I heard some wonderful stories about—" But George wasn't finished. He leaned forward, his voice taking on an almost accusatory quality. "Let me ask you this, Kevin. Do you think it's fair that you get to make these expensive passion projects while there are thousands of crew members in this industry struggling to find work? Doesn't that seem a bit, I don't know, privileged?" The studio went silent. Even the crew members visible in the background seemed to freeze. Michael's mouth actually fell open slightly. Robin looked absolutely stunned. Kevin took a slow breath, his legendary composure being tested in real time. "George, I'm not sure what's happening here right now, but that question is not only unfair, it's insulting. My projects employ hundreds of people. We pay fair wages. We create opportunities." "Do you?" George pressed. And now there was no mistaking the hostility. "Or do you create opportunities for people who are already connected, already in the club? When was the last time you hired someone who wasn't recommended by someone else in your inner circle?" "Excuse me?" Kevin's voice remained calm, but there was steel underneath now. "I've spent my entire career trying to open doors for new talent. I've mentored countless young filmmakers and actors." George actually laughed, a short, dismissive sound. "Mentored. That's an interesting word. Some might call it gatekeeping, Robin interjected, her voice urgent. George, I think maybe we should... No, Robin, I think our viewers deserve to hear honest questions, George said, not even looking at his co-host. His eyes remained locked on Kevin. They deserve to know whether the people they admire are really who they claim to be. Kevin's expression hardened. And what exactly are you implying? I'm not implying anything. I'm asking direct questions. For instance, there have been rumors about your behavior on set. Demanding. Difficult. Some crew members have used the word tyrannical. Would you like to address that? Michael finally found his voice. Hold on, George. I think you need to back up here, man. This is journalism, Michael, George snapped, his irritation now extending to his own colleagues. Maybe you're content to lob softball questions and smile for the camera, but some of us take our responsibility to the truth seriously. The entire panel recoiled. Robin's face showed genuine shock. Michael looked as if he'd been slapped. And Kevin Costner, this icon of American cinema, sat there processing the fact that he'd walked into an ambush. Kevin spoke slowly, deliberately. George, I came here in good faith. I came here to talk about a project I care about, to connect with people who might enjoy the work we've done. What I didn't come here for is to be attacked by someone who seems to have a personal problem with me that I'm not even aware of. Attacked? George's voice rose. You think being asked tough questions is an attack? Maybe that says more about you than it does about me. Tough questions? Kevin's composure was beginning to crack. Not from anger, but from genuine disbelief. You're not asking tough questions, George. You're making accusations based on rumors and innuendo. You're being disrespectful, not just to me, but to your colleagues, who are clearly uncomfortable with what you're doing. George waved a dismissive hand. Oh, here we go. The celebrity card. When the questions get uncomfortable, attack the questioner. Deflect, redirect, play the victim. I'm not playing anything, Kevin said, his voice rising now. I'm sitting here trying to understand why you invited me onto your show just to treat me like this. What did I do to you, George? Seriously, what did I do to deserve this kind of hostility? It's not about you personally, George said, though his tone suggested otherwise. It's about accountability. It's about not letting people hide behind their fame and their carefully crafted public images. Robin tried again, her voice almost pleading. George, please, this isn't right. Kevin is our guest. We invited him here. And as our guest, he should be prepared to answer real questions, George shot back. Unless you think we should just sit here and fawn over him for 20 minutes. Is that the kind of show you want to do, Robin? Robin's face flushed. That's not fair, and you know it. Kevin held up a hand. Robin, it's okay. Let me address this directly. He turned his full attention to George. You want accountability? Fine. Let's talk about accountability. Let's talk about what it means to sit in that chair and use your platform responsibly. You have a responsibility to your viewers, yes, but you also have a responsibility to basic human decency, to fairness, to truth. And right now, George, you're failing on all counts. How dare you? George's voice went cold. You sit there in your designer clothes with your movie star status and lecture me about responsibility. I sit here as someone who's been working in this industry for over 40 years, Kevin replied, his voice steady despite the clear emotion behind it. Someone who's made mistakes, learned from them, tried to do better. And yes, someone who's earned the right to be treated with basic respect, just like any human being should be. George leaned back, a smirk playing at his lips. There it is. The entitlement. The expectation that you should be treated differently because of who you are. No, Kevin said firmly. The expectation that I should be treated with the same courtesy you'd extend to any guest on this program. Or is that too much to ask? Michael shook his head. Man, This is wild. Kevin, I apologize. This isn't how we normally do things here. Don't apologize for me, Michael, George snapped. I'm doing my job. Your job? Kevin's voice carried a note of incredulity. Your job is to ambush people, to create conflict where none exists, to make your guests feel attacked and defensive. My job is to ask questions that other people are too afraid to ask, George said, his chin jutting forward defiantly. Or maybe, Kevin suggested, his tone sharpening, your job is to get ratings, and you've decided that being controversial is more important than being fair. Maybe you've confused journalism with performance art. George's face reddened. You don't get to come on my show and tell me how to do my job. Your show? Kevin raised his eyebrows. I thought this was Good Morning America. I thought it belonged to the network, to the viewers, to the team. But maybe that's the problem right there. You think it's your show, your platform, your opportunity to grind whatever axe you're carrying today. I don't have an axe to grind, George insisted, but his clenched jaw suggested otherwise. Really? Because from where I'm sitting, this feels incredibly personal. And I'm sitting here racking my brain, trying to figure out what I could have possibly done to make you dislike me this much. Robin interjected softly. Maybe we should take a break. Just pause for a moment and... We're live, Robin, George said curtly. We can't just take a break every time things get uncomfortable. Uncomfortable? Michael's voice carried a note of anger now. George, this isn't uncomfortable. This is unprofessional. This is wrong. George turned on Michael. Oh, now you're ganging up on me? Both of you? Taking the celebrity's side because God forbid we actually do some real journalism around here? This isn't journalism. Robin's voice rose, her usual composure cracking. This is you being unnecessarily cruel to someone who came here as our guest. Kevin watched the panel dissolve into chaos around him, and something seemed to shift in his demeanor. He sat back in his chair, his expression moving from defensive to something closer to pity. You know what, George? I actually feel sorry for you. George's head snapped toward him. Sorry for me? That's rich. I do, Kevin continued. Because whatever's driving this, whatever's making you behave this way, it's eating you up inside. I can see it. Everyone watching can see it. And the saddest part is that you're destroying your own credibility, your own reputation. And for what? To take shots at someone you don't even know? Don't psychoanalyze me, George warned. You don't know anything about me. You're right, I don't, Kevin agreed. Just like you don't know anything about me. But you've spent the last several minutes making assumptions, throwing around accusations, treating me like I'm on trial for crimes I didn't commit. And all I did was accept an invitation to come talk about my work. George opened his mouth to respond, but Kevin held up a hand. Let me finish, please, because I think this needs to be said. You have a platform that millions of people trust. They invite you into their homes every morning. They trust you to inform them, to entertain them, to treat people fairly. And what you've done here today, George, is betray that trust. Not just with me, but with everyone watching. How dare you, George began, but his voice lacked its earlier conviction. No, how dare you? Kevin's voice remained calm, but carried unmistakable weight. How dare you use your position to bully a guest? How dare you disrespect your colleagues, who are clearly trying to steer this back to something reasonable? How dare you take something that should have been a pleasant conversation and turn it into this circus? The studio was silent, except for the ambient noise of equipment. Even George seemed momentarily at a loss for words. Kevin stood up slowly, deliberately removing the microphone clipped to his jacket. I came here in good faith. I came here with respect for this program, for its history, for its viewers. But I won't sit here and be disrespected. I won't participate in whatever this is. You're walking out? George found his voice again, and there was almost triumph in it. You're proving my point. When the going gets tough. No, George, Kevin interrupted, his voice quiet but firm. I'm proving my point. I'm proving that dignity matters, that self-respect matters, that there comes a moment when you have to stand up and say, enough is enough. Robin stood as well, her eyes glistening. Kevin, please, I'm so sorry about this. This isn't representative of... I know, Robin, Kevin said gently, placing a hand on her shoulder. You've been nothing but kind and professional. You and Michael both. This isn't about you. He turned back to George. This is about one person who forgot that behind every public figure, every celebrity, every person in the spotlight, there's a human being who deserves basic respect. George sat rigid in his chair, his face a mask of conflicting emotions. If you walk out of here, everyone will know you couldn't handle a real interview. Kevin paused, considering this. Then he smiled, and it wasn't a friendly smile. George, everyone who watches this is going to know exactly what happened here. They're going to see a host who ambushed a guest. They're going to see colleagues trying desperately to restore some semblance of professionalism. They're going to see someone who came in good faith being treated with contempt for no apparent reason. And they're going to make their own judgments. He began walking toward the edge of the set, then stopped and turned back one more time. You know what the real tragedy is here, George? We could have had a great conversation. I could have talked about the themes in this project, about the incredible cast and crew, about what drove me to tell this particular story. Your viewers could have learned something, been entertained, maybe even been inspired. Instead, you chose this. You chose conflict over connection, aggression over curiosity, ego over empathy, and that's something you're going to have to live with. George's voice followed him, now tinged with desperation. You're making a mistake. Kevin stopped, but didn't turn around. The only mistake I made was thinking I was coming to a place where professionals work, where respect and courtesy still matter, where a guest could expect to be treated like a human being rather than a target. Michael called out, his voice sincere. Kevin, man, I'm really sorry about this. Kevin turned and gave him a genuine smile. Don't be, Michael. You conducted yourself with class. Both you and Robin did. Hold on to that. Don't let anyone convince you that what happened here today is acceptable, because it's not. Robin wiped at her eyes. We're going to make this right somehow. I know you'll try, Kevin said softly, but some things can't be fixed with an apology after the fact. Some things have to be right from the start. George finally stood, his voice rising. This is ridiculous. You're being overly sensitive. I asked you questions. That's my job. Kevin looked at him for a long moment, and when he spoke, his voice carried a weight of disappointment. No, George. Your job is to inform, to enlighten, to facilitate conversation. What you did here was none of those things. What you did was try to tear someone down, and when that didn't work the way you wanted, you got angry. That's not journalism. That's not professionalism. That's just sad. The silence that followed was deafening. Production staff stood frozen, unsure whether to cut to commercial or keep rolling. The other panel members looked shell-shocked, and George Stephanopoulos stood there, his face cycling through anger, defensiveness, and something that might have been shame. Kevin adjusted his jacket, standing tall despite everything that had just transpired. I hope you figure out whatever's driving this kind of behavior, George. I really do. Because nobody wins when we treat each other this way. Not you, not me, not the viewers at home. Nobody. With that, Kevin Costner walked off the Good Morning America set, leaving behind a panel in disarray and a host whose own behavior had become the story. Robin and Michael exchanged glances, their expressions mixing sympathy for their departed guest with concern for their colleague. The cameras continued rolling, capturing every second of the aftermath. George slowly sat back down, and for the first time that morning, he seemed uncertain. The confident, aggressive demeanor had cracked, revealing something more vulnerable underneath. But the damage was done. In less than 15 minutes, a routine interview had devolved into one of the most uncomfortable moments in morning television history. Robin finally found her voice, addressing the camera directly. "We need to go to a commercial break. When we come back..." But what could possibly come back from this? How do you recover when a host's behavior has so thoroughly derailed what should have been a straightforward celebrity interview? How do you explain to viewers that what they just witnessed wasn't supposed to happen? That this wasn't the plan? That something had gone terribly, inexplicably wrong? Michael rubbed his face, clearly distressed. "Man, what just happened?" George didn't answer. He stared at the spot where Kevin had been sitting, his expression unreadable. Whatever had driven him to conduct the interview that way, whatever personal or professional motivation had sparked his aggressive approach, it had backfired spectacularly. Kevin Costner had walked away with his dignity intact. Having refused to engage in the kind of combative theater George seemed intent on creating. The studio erupted into chaos as producers rushed onto the set, crew members whispered urgently to each other, and the remaining panel members tried to process what had just transpired. In the world of live television, mistakes happen. Technical glitches occur. Awkward moments are inevitable. But what had just played out was something else entirely. It was a complete breakdown of the implicit contract between host and guest, a violation of the basic standards of professional courtesy that make these kinds of interviews possible. And through it all, one truth remained crystal clear. Kevin Costner had come to Good Morning America expecting a conversation. Instead, he'd encountered hostility, disrespect, and aggressive questioning that seemed designed more to provoke than to inform. And when faced with that situation, he'd made the only choice that preserved his dignity. He'd walked away. The cameras finally cut to commercial, but the story was far from over. In those 49 seconds, when George first pivoted from friendly banter to pointed accusation, something had been set in motion that couldn't be stopped. A simple interview had become a confrontation. A guest had become a target. And a host had revealed something about himself that no amount of damage control could completely erase. Kevin Costner left the building that morning without the conversation he'd hoped to have about his work. But he left with something perhaps more valuable. He left having stood up for himself, having refused to participate in his own ambush, having demonstrated that respect and dignity aren't negotiable, regardless of the setting or the stakes. And in doing so, he'd given everyone watching a masterclass in grace under pressure, in knowing when to engage and when to walk away, in understanding that sometimes the most powerful response to hostility is simple, quiet refusal to accept it.